Spain, at the dawn of the 19th century, was a nation on the brink. The once great empire that had ruled vast territories across the Americas and Europe was a shadow of its former self. Political corruption, economic decay, and a monarchy clinging to outdated traditions had left the country vulnerable to both internal strife and external threats. Into this turbulent world was born Ferdinand VII, a prince whose life would become one of the most dramatic and tragic tales in European royal history. His reign would be marked by betrayal, repression, paranoia, and scandal, leaving behind a legacy so controversial that historians still debate whether he was the savior of Spain or its greatest curse. Ferdinand was born on October 14, 1784, the son of King Charles IV and Queen Maria Luisa of Parma. From the beginning, the atmosphere of the Spanish court was one of intrigue and manipulation. His father, Charles IV, was known as a good-hearted but indecisive monarch, often dominated by a strong-willed wife and her influential favorite, Manuel Godoy. Godoy, who had risen from a minor noble family to become the most powerful man in Spain, effectively ruled the kingdom, making decisions that shaped the nation's destiny. Ferdinand grew up watching this dynamic with a mixture of resentment and ambition. He saw Godoy as a usurper of power, and he viewed his mother with suspicion, believing she placed more trust in her favorite than in her own son. This toxic environment instilled in Ferdinand a deep paranoia and a burning desire to seize power for himself. By the late 18th century, Spain's problems were mounting. The country had allied itself with France during the French Revolutionary Wars, a decision that dragged Spain into disastrous conflicts. The defeat at Trafalgar in 1805 shattered Spanish naval power, leaving the empire vulnerable and humiliated. Inside Spain, famine and poverty spread as economic reforms failed to keep pace with the needs of the people. Ferdinand, now a young man, saw the growing unrest as an opportunity. He began plotting against his father and Godoy, secretly communicating with factions at court who wanted to see him crowned king. His supporters painted Ferdinand as the nation's salvation, the prince who would rid Spain of Godoy's corrupt influence and restore dignity to the monarchy. In 1808, Ferdinand's ambitions came to a head during the Mutiny of Aranjuez, a dramatic uprising that forced Charles IV to abdicate and hand the crown to his son. For a brief moment, Ferdinand became King of Spain, celebrated by the people as El Deseo, the desired one. Crowds filled the streets, church bells rang, and hope surged through the country. But this triumph was short-lived. Napoleon Bonaparte, seeing an opportunity to extend his control over the Iberian Peninsula, invited Ferdinand and the royal family to Bayonne under the pretense of mediating the political crisis. It was a trap. Under pressure, Ferdinand was forced to abdicate, and Napoleon installed his brother Joseph Bonaparte as King of Spain. Ferdinand was sent into captivity in France, where he remained for 6 long years. During this time, Spain descended into chaos. The Peninsular War erupted as Spanish guerrillas and British allies fought to drive out the French. The war was brutal, with atrocities committed by both sides, and the country was left devastated. Ferdinand, far from the battlefield, could only watch events unfold from a gilded prison. Historians believe that these years in captivity profoundly affected him, deepening his paranoia and hardening his resolve to rule with absolute authority once he returned. When Napoleon was finally defeated in 1814, Ferdinand was released and allowed to return to Spain. His homecoming was a moment of national euphoria. People lined the roads to see their king, showering him with flowers and cheers. They believed he would embrace the liberal constitution of 1812, a document that had been drafted in Cadiz during the war to guarantee rights and limit royal power. But Ferdinand had no intention of sharing authority. Almost immediately, he abolished the constitution, dissolved the liberal Cortes, and restored absolute monarchy. He began a reign of repression that earned him a reputation as one of the most reactionary rulers in Europe. Political opponents were imprisoned or executed, censorship was enforced, and the Inquisition, though diminished, regained some of its power. The man who had once been hailed as the nation's savior became its feared tyrant. Ferdinand's personal life was no less troubled. He married 4 times, yet his first 3 marriages produced no surviving heirs. His first wife, Princess Maria Antonia of Naples and Sicily, was widely loved by the Spanish people, but her relationship with Ferdinand was fraught with tension. She died young, and rumors spread that she had been poisoned, some whispering that Ferdinand himself had allowed or even ordered it, though historians generally dismiss this as court gossip. His second and third marriages were also plagued by tragedy, ending without heirs and fueling speculation about the king's health and virility. Medical records and personal letters suggest that Ferdinand may have suffered from a severe urogenital condition that made conception extremely difficult. This failure to produce an heir became an obsession. The future of the Bourbon dynasty was at stake, and pressure mounted from all sides. Court physicians experimented with treatments, ranging from herbal concoctions to mechanical devices, in hopes of helping Ferdinand fulfill his royal duty. The king endured these humiliating procedures with growing desperation. Each failed pregnancy deepened his paranoia, and he began to view the lack of an heir as a curse, a punishment visited upon him by God for the sins of his family and his own political betrayals. Finally, Ferdinand married his 4th wife, Maria Cristina of the 2 Sicilies, who was much younger and determined to secure the succession. Against all odds, Maria Cristina became pregnant, and in 1830 she gave birth to a daughter, Isabella. For Ferdinand, this was both a triumph and the beginning of a new crisis. Under Spain's traditional Salic law, women were barred from inheriting the throne. If Ferdinand died without a male heir, the crown would pass to his brother, Don Carlos, a staunch conservative who had his own supporters at court. Determined to secure Isabella's place, Ferdinand issued the Pragmatic Sanction, changing the law to allow his daughter to inherit. This decision outraged Don Carlos and his followers, who saw it as an illegitimate act. As Ferdinand's health declined, political tensions reached a boiling point. The king grew increasingly paranoid, convinced that plots were being hatched against him in every corner of the court. He surrounded himself with loyalists, purging anyone suspected of sympathy for the Carlists. His final years were marked by cruelty, fear, and intrigue. On September 29, 1833, Ferdinand VII died, leaving the throne to his 3-year-old daughter, Isabella II, with Maria Cristina as regent. His death sparked the First Carlist War, a brutal civil conflict that would tear Spain apart for years. Ferdinand's legacy is one of contradiction. To his supporters, he was the rightful king who restored the Bourbon dynasty after the Napoleonic occupation. To his critics, he was a despot who crushed liberty, betrayed his people's hopes, and left the nation fractured. He is often called the worst king Spain ever had, a man whose personal obsessions shaped the fate of a country. His reign is a chilling reminder of how the private struggles of a single ruler can alter the course of history. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of Ferdinand's story is that it is as much about fear as it is about power. Fear of losing the throne, fear of dying without an heir, fear of being remembered as weak. This fear drove Ferdinand to make choices that plunged Spain into cycles of repression and war, choices that would cost thousands of lives and leave scars that lasted for generations. His so-called curse was not supernatural. It was the very human curse of paranoia, obsession, and the desperate need to control an uncontrollable world. So, as we look back on the reign of Ferdinand VII, we see more than a king. We see a man consumed by his demons, a monarch who turned his personal pain into national tragedy, and whose story still echoes as a warning from the past. History remembers him not as a hero or a villain, but as a tragic figure whose life serves as a dark mirror reflecting the dangers of unchecked power. If this deep dive into Spain's most cursed monarch has fascinated you, help us share this story with the world. Hit the like button,